absolutely. All right, another common one we got is around obstructive sleep apnea. So we know obstructive sleep apnea is a sleep-related breathing disorder. Is retimer something that can help with that? And if not, what should people be doing?
Well, that question probably arose from the fact that we had a lot of obstructive sleep apnea was a big part of the SBS program. But it is a completely different sleep disorder caused by closures of the airways at nighttime when
Mm,
people fall asleep. And it doesn't look like there's necessarily any retiming that needs to be done with sleep apnea. Unfortunately, the most common treatment for obstructive sleep apnea is called continuous positive airway pressure, a
mm,
mask they have to wear. And that splints open the airways when they fall asleep, when they lose muscle tension out of their throat muscles, and you get an airways collapse. Uh,
mm.
a bit of air forced into the airways keeps them open and stops them from shutting off. So it's a completely different physiology,
Mm.
not apparently associated with any retiming problem.
Yeah, absolutely. All
So,
right.
so I'm afraid the retimers are not a treatment for obstructive sleep apnea.
No, exactly. And that sounds like if you do have obstructive sleep apnea, your GP or your doctor would be first point of call. But going forward from that, as we saw in Dr. Mosley's presentation, there can be co-meds or comorbid other difficulties that you can address after that, but that would come after and it's not related. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And although CPAP is probably the most common treatment for obstructive sleep apnea, we found in our experiments here in the SBS program that that changing position can quite often be the only thing that has to be done, particularly for people that find it uh, very difficult to accept the CPAP machine at nighttime.
Mm,
It may be the case that their apneic events are only really taking place when they're lying on their back, which is very common.
yeah.
And if they turn onto their side, they obstructive events disappear entirely, and they don't have sleep apnea.
Mm,
And there are devices that people can wear to keep them off their back, or if they happen to have a bed partner who can elbow them, say whenever they start snoring badly and stop breathing, to turn back over on their side if they happen to turn onto
absolutely.
their back.
There you go. Leon, while we're here, I might just get you to close your sharing so that people can see your
Oh,
beautiful face. So a couple more questions. Sorry, I know everyone. I will try and get to as many as we can. Um, so a few questions around rotational shift work. So using retimers to help with rotating shifts or shift work. Do you have any advice around that, Leon, or when someone should use it or how they should use retimer?
yes, but it's a lot more complicated in the cases I was talking about before
Mm,
because uh, there are so many different types of shift work and there's so
mm,
many different types of individuals. For instance, an evening type person can go onto a night shift pretty
mm,
quickly and pretty easily and cope with that pretty well. Uh, but then coming off the night shift, if they're doing a rotating shift and they have to go on to an early day shift, then that can be the most difficult for them. So it's an interplay between individual differences and the type of shift that they're dealing with. Very common shift work situation is rotating shifts, where they might rotate between two 12-hour shifts
mm,
or three 8-hour shifts,
mhm,
early day, late afternoon, night, that type of thing. And they might shift from early day to late day to night to early day, late day to night, or they might shift in the opposite direction. So,
mm.
there are just almost an infinite number of different shift work schedules. And so it's a little bit hard to generalize about how you can
Yeah.
retimer glasses. My personal feeling is that particularly people who are doing rotating shifts, particularly rapid rotation, like they go
Mm,
on to uh, 2 day shifts and then 2 afternoon shifts and 2 night shifts and back to day
mm,
shifts after 3 rest days, something like that.
mm.
That the best thing is really to try to keep a stabilized rhythm rather than trying to force your body clock to delay by 8 hours over 2 days and then 8 hours again 2 days. You won't be able to do it. Um,
Mm,
the retimers will really be able to change the timing of your body clock at the most by 2 or 3 hours
yeah.
in any one go. And that won't be enough to really help very much for the shifts. And then if you've timed your body onto the night shift, you then have to go onto the day shift. And
Yeah.
so you don't want to put your body through all this constant rotation and jet lag experience. And I think with rapidly rotating shifts, it's probably better to try to maintain a consistent timing of your body clock at a fixed time. Fixed time for, say, the day shift and for your days off. And in that case, it might be useful, particularly when you're doing the day shift, to wear the retimers in the morning when you first wake up for half an hour to an hour on those mornings, and on your days off to also get up at the same time as you do on your day shifts and wear the retimers in the morning there too. And so that'll stop your rhythm from delaying. Now, I know what this will do is that it probably won't make it difficult for your afternoon shift, but it will make it more difficult for your night shift. But the night shift with a rapid rotating shift schedule is probably only 2 nights in a row. So it'll be difficult to get through the night shift, but then you'll be off it back on days off. And
Yeah.
So if you try to use the retimers to follow a crazy, rapidly rotating shift schedule, it's going to cause chaos, and it probably will be much less healthy for you than if you use the retimers to try to maintain some stability. But if you are going on to a permanent night shift, and you say have night shift for 5 days in a row, and then 4 days off, and then night shift for another 5 days, then the retimer glasses can be used in the evening, even on your night shift. It depends on what you're doing in the night shift, in the early part of the night shift, to delay your body clock so that you end up as if your body clock is telling you it's a daytime on your night shift, so you're able to perform really well and able to sleep much better during the day.
Absolutely. Good advice. All right. So a little question around sleep studies and using body temperature measurements, as we did in SBS, to help us understand where the core body temperature minimum is. Obviously, traditional sleep studies were quite unique here in that we do very in-depth sleep studies around circadian timing, which is unique. For someone who can't have that, how do they know that they're using the retimer at the right time? Or how might they know?
Yeah, that's a good question. Really, the only evidence they have, I guess, is from their own experience about what time of the day can they sleep and sleep with the best quality sleep. When do they start getting this wave of sleepiness overcoming them? Does it occur at 10 p.m. in the evening or 9 p.m. in the evening, and they fall asleep really quickly, but then wake up early? That's really good evidence that their body clock is timed probably early. And the opposite is for people that are just feeling, really productive, really alert, really good mood at 10 and 11 p.m. at nighttime. And that's when they like to do their work because they're very productive when they do it then, naturally. And so if they're experiencing that, and also experiencing, not being able to get to sleep until 12:30, 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m., but can easily sleep in till, late in the morning or even noon or afternoon, that's a good clue that their body clock is delayed, and they need to use the retimers or bright light therapy, at least in the mornings as soon as they wake up, and start systematically shifting their wake up times a little bit earlier and earlier, and getting that light as early as they can each time.
Yeah. Good.
It'll work. It'll work. They just have to persevere.
Slow and steady wins the race. That's it. A question from a fellow sleep scientist out there who runs Sleep Clinic. So there's a few different protocols around evening bright light and how to do evening bright light, which we know about, do you, Emilion? So is there one in particular that's most helpful than others? And should we be adhering to any particular bright light protocols in the evening?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you're dealing with somebody like Michael Mosley, that clearly has an advanced body clock, and we could have predicted that without core body temperature measurements on him, just from his clinical descriptions. Then the last thing before they go to bed at nighttime is to get the light stimulation, and even stronger effect will occur if you can keep them up for an hour later than normal. Because the light will be then presented to them at the greatest phase delay portion of the sensitivity curve. But I'm not quite sure what else the person was wanting to find out about in terms of light protocols in the evening. Now, like I said, the majority of the population have a longer than 24-hour body clock. And so most of us, to a greater or lesser extent, have a tendency to delay. And so most of us, for most of us, it's probably not a good idea to get exposed to bright light in the evening and to keep light levels down low, because that bright light in the evening will tend to delay your body clock. Our body clock already has a tendency to delay. So on a more regular basis, we need to counteract that tendency by waking up at a pretty regular time in the morning, opening up our eyes, getting exposed to light.
Yeah.
If it's a nice sunny day, then get into a nice room with sunlight coming through. But if it's wintertime and it's rainy and cloudy outdoors, then the retimers can be really helpful in those cases.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, this bit leads into this next question quite nicely. For someone who's completely flipped the other way, so who's essentially nocturnal in their sleep pattern, how could they use the retimer for that? What might be a good way to use retimer to help them get back to a normal circadian rhythm timing if they wanted to do that?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what their end goal is. I mean, if this is really causing problems for them, and they really have to get their sleep back into the nighttime, and they are finding that they can only sleep from, I don't know, 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. in the afternoon, let's say. I'm not sure exactly what the timing of the person's sleep is, and maybe it's a bit chaotic anyway. But if that's the case, so they're sleeping from 9 a.m. quite easily. They finally feel sleepy at 9 a.m. They fall asleep. They sleep for 8 hours until maybe 6 p.m. in the day. And this is very inconvenient for them. They say, how can I shift it? Well, probably with a sleep pattern that late, and that it sounds like they probably would have a stronger than normal tendency to phase delay. So they probably were in earlier life evening types, and then they became sleep-wake phase disordered types, and they're really delayed now. Probably rather than trying to shift the body clock back earlier, now if they're sleeping until 6 p.m., they want to be able to wake up at 8 a.m. in the morning. That means shifting the body clock back earlier by 10 hours. It would probably be more effective for them to not try to phase advance their body clock 10 hours, but to delay it 14 hours. Because most likely their body clock will be quite a bit longer than 24 hours. And so they have a strong natural tendency to delay anyway. And so go with the flow in a sense, and use the light before they go to sleep. So from in the first morning, stay up till 10 a.m. and use the light for 2 hours before 10 a.m. before they go to sleep, and sleeping as long as they like. And then the next sleep period, stay up till 12 noon and have the light for 2 hours beforehand. And then the next day, 2 p.m. bedtime and light from noon till 2 p.m. And the next day, 4 p.m., 6 p.m., 8 p.m., 10 p.m. and
Keep going.
until they get to pretty much to their target where they want to stabilize it. And when they get to their target area, they should shift the light right around and use the light in the mornings only and dim light in the evenings.
Yep, to hit the brakes, so to speak.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Fantastic. Do we need to use retimers forever? Is it something that we need to use them forever?
Well, again, that depends. I mean, if you're like a really extreme evening type person, you can probably expect that your body clock is, 24 hours and 20 or 25 minutes in length. And that is probably mainly genetically determined. And so you're probably going to have a tendency to delay for the rest of your life. So the periodic use of the retimers in the morning, if you're waking up at 9 a.m. in the morning and the sun is shining and it's a beautifully light day, well, then go outside in the sunshine. That will be an even stronger effect than even the retimers. But that's broad spectrum white light, but that white light has a lot of blue-green light in it, and so it'll affect the system in the same way, but it's much more intense light. So it'll have a stronger effect. So, take your dog for a walk, schedule activities for yourself outdoors in the sunshine. Don't wear your dark glasses.
Mm,
Don't look up at the sun.
mm,
Certainly, that'll ruin your retinas. But be exposed to nice bright blue skylight
yeah,
for at least an hour in the mornings.
yeah,
Uh, uh, but and if you do that on the weekends or something, that'd be good. Schedule some enjoyable activities to do outside.
yeah.
But again, a lot of people will be faced with wintertime and rain and cloudiness and so forth. So the retimers will need to be
Help
used
with that.
on
Yeah,
a periodic basis at least. So if it really depends on how strong your tendency to delay is. And if it's a very strong tendency, it might be a good idea to use them virtually every morning you get up for at least half an hour,
yeah,
just to put the brakes and to push your rhythm back a little bit earlier into its proper niche.
yeah. Absolutely. And I'm aware there's a couple of people in the chat just going back and forward on. We've had one comment around that someone's had quite a lot of success using the retimers in the evening, and a couple of people asking when they use them, and they've said between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. So Leon, I'm just asking you to comment here. Can we use them at the same time all the time, or is it person specific? Should we be more wondering about our own and doing on our own experience, or should we be mapping to a specific time for retimer?
No, it really is dependent upon what your needs are.
Yes. Yeah.
Like when are your commitments in the morning? When do you need to wake up in the morning?
Mm.
When do you want to be able to sleep to? What time? Uh, and so you should be able to use the retimers to adjust the timing of your sleep period to the point that's most convenient for you. I mean, some people like the ability to fall asleep at 9 p.m. in the evening, and aren't bothered by that at all. And particularly during the summertime, like to wake up then at 4 a.m. in the morning,
Yeah.
and the sun's starting to come up, and they go for a walk, and they love the early morning. They're morning type people, and
Exactly.
uh, and they don't have any problems going to bed at 9 o'clock. They're not expected to give public talks at 10 p.m. at night. They're not expected to go out to party
Mm.
and all. They avoid that anyway. Um, but
Yeah.
maybe they have a spouse that would like to stay up and play bridge with him until 11 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
and they say, "Oh, gee, I really can't. I'm feeling so tired at night. I couldn't play bridge with any competence or anything like that," and they would really like to be able to stay up, and do a bit more. Well, they can use the retimers in the evenings
Help with that
delay their body
extra.
clock and link up with their partner if that's what they want to do. So.
Fantastic.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I have come across some couples in the past that lead almost entirely different timed lives, and they prefer
Yes.
they prefer it that way.
They've
So
heard that way. It's
so
each
so
to
one
our own.
goes to
Yeah.
bed at 9 o'clock, and the other goes to bed at 2 o'clock, and they hardly pass like ships at night.
She's in
So,
that. Yes.
uh, but so it really depends what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, so it's very individual. When we choose to use them and how we use them is really individual to us. And I know there is a calculator tool. One of the people in chat has also just said there is a calculator tool from Retimer as well that can help you guide around when to use them. And I've also put just a little comment in the chat there for anyone who, if we don't get to your question today, the support at retimer.com, you can send specific queries to them as well. All right, just a couple more questions, and then we'll probably be finishing up. There is also an app as well, and I think, yep, Chris has also put the thank you, Chris has put the thing in the chat there for anyone as well who has an app that can help with that as well to know when to use the retimers. A couple more questions before we finish up. So, how much can we be reliant on our sleep devices? So there's quite a couple of people who've noted that, if my Fitbit is saying this, if my Garmin is saying this, should I be worried? What's your take on that, Leon?
Yeah, well, the sleep apps on all these wearable devices these days, might be helpful to some people, but also be potentially worried to other people, especially if it's giving them underestimate about how much sleep they're actually getting. Some people are they move around a lot when they are asleep. It doesn't disturb their sleep. They're just very mobile. And
Yeah.
almost all the devices depend upon activity as the main source of information about whether or not they're awake or asleep. And so all the algorithms that take into account these sensors, the main sensor is activity, wrist activity. Some of them have heart rate sensors and oxygen sensors and so forth, and those contribute a little bit to making the estimate about sleep a little bit more accurate, but only marginally. It comes mainly from activity, and some people are very active and
Yes.
mobile when they stay asleep.
Yes.
But they will then get an answer from their mobile device. You only had 5 hours sleep last night. You better do something about it. When they might have had 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep. So the device was very inaccurate in those cases.
Yeah.
And other people are able to lie there quite quietly and very still and not be thrashing about the place. And they'll get an estimate, which is probably an overestimate about how much sleep they got. And so they'll wake up feeling annoyed in the morning saying, the device said I got 7.5 hours sleep last night, but I know I only got for 6 hours of sleep.
Yes.
I was awake for 2 hours last night. But we do know that people with chronic insomnia tend to underestimate their total sleep time. As soon as people start waking up across the night, their judgments about how much sleep they actually obtain become quite inaccurate. And we think we know the reason for that is that it's very difficult for people with chronic insomnia to recognize an awakening out of sleep. We know that the mind is active across the night, almost all the time, not just in dreaming sleep when it's more obvious, but even in non-dreaming sleep, we'll be thinking about things as if we're just lying there awake, thinking about things. So if you wake up out of that stage of sleep, you'll get the feeling like, oh, I'm still awake. I wonder how long I've been awake. You look at the clock. Oh, it's an hour later than I looked at it last time. Oh my gosh, I've been awake for an hour. And they assume they've been awake for that whole time. And in fact, they might have slept for 15 minutes and only been awake for 10 minutes on the first occasion. So sleep misjudgments are pretty common in people that have chronic insomnia. So if your wearable device says that you had 7 hours of sleep last night, and you think, oh, that couldn't be right. I only slept for 4 hours because I was awake for 3 hours. That may be true, but it's also quite likely that you got more sleep than you felt you had for that sleep misperception issue, which we know is really present a lot of the time. And so that might be reassuring to people saying, oh, actually, my sleep wasn't too bad. I'm not too far off that golden mean of 8 hours of sleep. Now, there's been a lot of media attention just recently to if you don't get enough sleep at nighttime. And the sleep community of which I'm a member quite often will dramatize the bad things that will happen to you if you don't get enough sleep, because we're trying to, coach people and encourage them to get more sleep, because most people probably don't get as much sleep as their bodies would like, and therefore are probably not getting the best quality of life for themselves because they shortchange their sleep, because they give it a lower priority. They say, oh, I have to stay up to see the end of this movie, and they stay up too late. Or I have to stay up and answer my emails, or I have to answer my, TikTok or whatever it is. And they're habituated to this, so they're addicted to it, and they can't stop themselves. And as a result, they get too little sleep. They just need to reprioritize their lives a little bit, I think, and give sleep a little bit more importance to them. And if they did and allowed themselves more sleep, they'd get more sleep. And so our messages go out to these people, encouraging them to get adequate sleep for their sleep need. But a lot of people who are developing sleeping problems and are very concerned about their sleep, typically the people with chronic insomnia or periodic insomnia, see these messages come out in the media about how dreadful your health will be and what you'll suffer if you don't get adequate sleep. Most of these studies come from what we call epidemiological studies, where they find a significant but very small association between how much sleep people get and long-term sort of health consequences. And that gets inflated and blown up to too much of an extent, so that Even though, yes, there's a significant association there that we can't account for, and maybe it's due to less sleep than they need to get. But people with chronic insomnia quite often feel like, oh, that's them. And
Mm.
are they going to suffer some of the consequences? A lot of which have more recently focused attention on cognitive performance and dementia. Um,
Yes.
is the risk of dementia increased by inadequate sleep? We don't really have good evidence to support that yet.
Mm.
But some experimental studies in the United States have found mechanisms that flush the brain free of toxic
Mm.
chemicals that build up during the day. And if we don't flush them free, maybe plaque will build up similar to Parkinson's disease or dementia, and that'll lead to dementia. That's all extremely hypothetical, and there's no direct
Mm.
linkage between these things. So the jury is definitely out yet on
Yeah.
what the mechanism is relating length of sleep with any of these long-term health risks.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and I like to reassure people that the health risk is much less severe and important than they might pick up from media
From the media.
presentations.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really key message, Leon. Just because it's in the media doesn't necessarily mean that it's perfectly true. So it should always be, if we're concerned, always reach out. But I agree with you. It's about taking with a bit of a pinch of salt sometimes. Um,
Most of our experimental studies that have deprived people of sleep, what happens
mm,
if you deprive people of sleep? Oh, they die. I've heard that. No,
yes.
no one has died from sleep loss.
No.
There is a very, very rare neurological condition that develops and has been um, reported in a few case studies, but it's so rare that no one is going to get it.
Mm,
But it's a neurological disorder which has, as part of it, degeneration of basal ganglia areas in the
mm,
brain, and it has an effect on sleep. Sleep shortens, but the person doesn't die as a lack of sleep. It's all part of the same syndrome, which eventually
mm.
kills them. Um, uh,
And
but
that's
most of the experimental studies to deprive humans of sleep have found that humans just get very, very sleepy when they get
mm,
deprived of sleep. So it becomes impossible to keep them awake. And
mm,
then when they're allowed recovery sleep, and Randy Gardner has the Guinness Book of Records for 11 days and nights without any sleep,
yeah,
and until he couldn't continue to stay awake across the night at the circadian low, because to stay awake required him jogging in place. If he just stopped moving, he would fall asleep. If he
yeah,
sat down, he fell asleep and he couldn't be woken. He'd go in deep sleep really right away. He, got 14 hours of sleep the first night, 12 hours the next night, 10 hours the next night, and he's fully recovered.
yes,
And all
exactly.
the experimental studies to deprive people of sleep for, say, 4 or 5 days in a row have not been able to find any health consequences of that.
Yep. Good. All right, a couple more questions. We will get cut off in about 10 minutes for everyone online. So again, just prompting that if you did have specific questions, send them through to Retimer or use the app as needed. We'll just do probably two more questions, Leon, and then we might finish up. Is that all right with you?
Sure. And
Sounds
they
good.
can still have the opportunity, I guess, to put it on the chat
Mm,
line. And we could put it up on the Retime website, answers to these questions, if they're very common questions. I think some of these questions are answered on the Retime website, but we'll make sure that all the ones that were presented here at least get put up.
absolutely, absolutely. All right. Just very briefly, Leon, in terms of using retimers with glasses, can they use retimers with, when they're trying to read a book or when they're watching TV? Is it okay to wear retimers with that?
Yep, of
All
course.
good? Yes.
That's exactly why we designed them the way that they're designed
Mm,
to fit over reading glasses or spectacles of any sort. And
beautiful.
the new ones that are coming out, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, will also be compatible with people wearing glasses too.
Fantastic. Good to know. Um, and a few questions as well have come through around sleep efficiency and restricting sleep. I know this is not directly related to retimer, but a lot of people are asking, what is sleep efficiency and why does restricting sleep help with it? Do you have a very brief comment on that just to answer a few people?
Well, sleep efficiency is measured as the total amount of sleep that you obtained divided by the amount of time that you're in bed.
Mm,
So if you fall asleep immediately, go to bed, and wake up without any wakings across the night, you'll have 100% sleep efficiency. But somebody that has 100% sleep efficiency is probably sleep deprived if they can fall asleep so quickly and not wake up at all. Waking up across the night should be considered part of the normal sleep pattern, because we go through sleep cycles, 90 minutes long, come into light sleep every 90 minutes. And in light sleep, it's very easy to wake up. Any little disturbance, need to go to the toilet, uncomfortable position that you're sleeping in or whatever it is, any sort of noise in the environment that might be a possible danger, you'll wake up to at those points. So waking up at those light sleep phases across the night should be considered quite normal. So, but that's not the impression that most people have what a good sleep should be like. Most people feel like a good sleep should be like this long valley of unconsciousness, and that therefore waking up in the middle of the night is pathological. That's not true. Sleep is like this roller coaster, up and down across the night every 90 minutes. And so we come into these light sleep phases every 90 minutes and very likely wake up out of them. Not for very long. You have to go to the toilet, you go to the toilet, go back to bed, fall back to sleep again. That should have absolutely no effect on how you feel the next day. Those short interruptions.
Short awakening. Yeah. Fantastic. All right, Leon, so any closing remarks before we let everyone go and hopefully get some sleep?
Well, I didn't say it. Sleep restriction therapy is, condensing. That's one of the behavioral therapies that's quite effective at treating chronic insomnia, particularly people who don't have a delayed sleep pattern or an advanced sleep pattern, but who go to bed, take a while to get to sleep, but then wake up and spend long periods of time awake at nighttime. Start ruminating and fretting about the fact that they're awake and start getting upset. And this happens night after night, and they become quite exhausted by this whole affair and distressed by it. But the sleep restriction therapy can be very helpful at reconsolidating the sleep and reconditioning the body to fall back to sleep quickly when they do wake up. And is a good behavioral therapy for the treatment of insomnia. But that's carried out usually by clinical psychologist, and or there are some online programs that are available now can help you step it through if you can do this on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always the key, isn't it? We should never have to go through sleep difficulties alone. There's always help out there. And it's always a good idea to get some help if you are struggling. But the retimers are definitely a good tool in that. All right, Leon. Well, that is it for us tonight. I'm just going to remind everyone again, if I didn't get to your question tonight, I'm sorry, we had quite a few. I've just popped another thing in the chat. Support@retimer.com. Do feel free to send through any specific queries there, and they can assist as needed. Have a look at the app if you haven't already. That can also help with when to wear the glasses, because that can be tricky to figure out as well. And other than that, I think we are all good to go. Leon, any last minute closing remarks, anything you'd like to say or leave everyone with?
Well, have a better sleep tonight. And, try not to worry too much about your sleep. It really is a very strong mechanism. It has a way of looking after its own. Our best thing we can do to it is leave it alone and not to worry about it. It'll strike us when it needs to.
Yeah. Fantastic. Good advice, Leon. All right. Thank you so much. And a big thank you to Leon, of course, for hosting this webinar. And we wish everyone all the very best with their retimer and sleep journeys. And yeah, I hope you all have a fantastic night's sleep. All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Okay.
Goodbye. Bye.